So yes, now we are going to talk about the second part of the plasma membrane, okay, the structure and function itself. So here I would like to talk about again the fluid mosaic model. So this everyone knows, right? So here I would like to discuss about each and every protein which are associated with the RBC membrane. Okay, so let's discuss about this. So now we know that we have been familiar with the name now glycophorin and band 3. So let's discuss more about it. So we know this is the phospholipid layer, bilayer, outer and inner membrane is there now. Okay? Now this is your integral proteins. The proteins which are passing through the phospholipids are called the integral proteins. Like this one, this one, this one, right? So you can see that glycophorin is also your one of the integral proteins. Now, coming to the peripheral, so you can see over here, this is attached to your band 3. Okay, so this is your ankyrin. They are called peripheral proteins. Then we have the other proteins like spectrin. So as I mentioned before, they are like actually forming the network so that the entire phospholipid layer of the membrane can be held on the top of it. Okay, so it doesn't collapse like this. So it will be holding the structure of your membrane like this. Then we have got the other associated proteins like band 4.1, adenosine, band 4.9, tropomyosin and actin. Now these protein you must have heard during your muscle movement. So there also we'll talk about this in detail. So in this fluid mosaic model, what you need to remember is about the glycophorin, band 3, ankyrin and spectrin. Okay. So you need to remember only these proteins regarding RBC membrane, plasma membrane. Then what is their function? So glycophorin, now we know that it is actually integral proteins and helps the malarial parasite to enter in our system into the RBC. Okay. Then ankyrin is there, which is supporting the band 3. And what is the function of band 3? It is helping in the exchange of O2 and CO2 in the RBC. So we know that the RBC is responsible for carrying oxygen, right? From lungs to the other tissue and from tissues to the lungs. So this is done with the help of the band 3. The exact mechanism we'll study in the upcoming future classes. So just for time being, just remember that band 3 is actually helping in the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay. Okay, so these are the structures of plasma membrane proteins. So here you can see that there are different proteins which are actually can be seen on the plasma membrane. So see, this is a phospholipid layer, outer and inner is there. Now this is how a integral monotropic protein will be seen. So can you see, it is not actually crossing the entire but half of the lipid layer. Okay. Then you have got a protein which is passing the entire in a single pass protein. So what does it mean? So you see, once what happens after the translation, your protein has been synthesized, the polypeptide chain gets inserted into the phospholipid layer. Okay. So this portion is again polar. This portion is again polar. Only the proteins which are hydrophobic, the amino acids which are hydrophobic, that is again water hating region, only will get integrated into the phospholipid layer. Okay. So what is happening? Now this means that this protein has been integrated like this. Okay, so this is called single pass protein. That is only one time it is passing the phospholipid layer. Then you have got multi-pass. So this is the N-terminal and C-terminal of a protein. Then it is passing multiple times. So in this current situation, this is 3 pass. Here it is 1 pass. And then you have got the others multi-subunit protein. What does it mean then? It means that 2 or more polypeptide chains have come together and integrated. Okay. So it means this is one protein, this is another protein. This is one polypeptide, this is another polypeptide. But they are same. The only thing is they are coming together. You must have heard about the protein called dimer, trimer, tetramer. So in this case, it is going to be your dimer. Okay. Now then we have got the peripheral proteins and then fatty acyl. So they are like, GPI anchors. So they help in holding the peripheral proteins. So they hold certain proteins, and whenever there is a cell signaling, they release these proteins. Okay. So I guess this is clear. Please stop me if something is not clear to you guys. Okay, now let's talk more about the membrane associated proteins. So already we know that there are two types, integral and the peripheral proteins. Okay, so from the figure you can see over here, again a little repetition will be there. So don't mind that, it's just for the revision. So you can see over here, many peripheral proteins are there. See, that is at the base it is present. Okay, now one thing what you have to remember over here is that many of these peripheral proteins are negatively charged. Okay. Now, what is the significance of having this negative charge? So that they can maintain the potential of the membrane. You must have heard about the resting potential, right? Now, we know that, can anyone tell me what is the resting potential of a membrane? What is the resting potential of a membrane? Can anyone tell me? Yes, Pallavi, Likita, anyone? What is the resting potential of a membrane? Okay, so I guess nobody knows then. So the answer is that the resting potential of membrane is minus 70 millivolt. Okay, please remember, because the next what we are going to talk in the upcoming lectures is about the membrane potential. So the answer is resting potential is minus 70 millivolt. So how they have done using the technique called patch clamp technique. This also we'll discuss. Don't worry about it. So okay, so this negative, why it is negative? It's all because of the negatively charged peripheral proteins which are present on the inner side of the membrane. Okay, so that is the reason that the membrane potential is going to be negative in charge. Next. So we know that these are the integral proteins, so which is actually passing the phospholipid layer again and again. Okay. So this, you can see that over here it is around, many are there. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 times this protein has passed. So it becomes a transmembrane protein. So some integral membrane proteins are extending completely across the membrane. So they are the hydrophobic alpha helices. So whenever you see any structure like this, it means this protein has got the alpha helix. If you see the structures like this, then it means it is the beta sheets. So when we study about the biomolecules, I'll mention in detail about the structures of proteins. Okay. So for timing, this is enough that whenever you see a helical, it is the alpha helices, mainly hydrophobic amino acids are present in the transmembrane proteins. Okay, so this is another example where you can see the porine monomer. So what are porines? Like aquaporins, we discussed last time that it is going to allow the water to pass through the membrane. So this is how the porins looks like. So you can see it's actually having a hollow in between. So this is, instead of alpha helices, you have got the beta pleated sheets. And this is one example which is present in the bacterial outer membrane. So by which you can see from here, it can pass through. This is just one example of a transmembrane protein. Okay. Now peripheral proteins. So they are not embedded in the membrane, but ionically or hydrogen bonds, they are attached to the integral protein. So you can see at the bottom, that is on the inner side of the protein, inner side of the plasma membrane, the peripheral proteins are attached. Now, the protein profile of one membrane side typically differs from that of the other side. So obviously, right? So if you see over here in this figure, this is the extracellular layer. So if you take a plasma membrane, okay, if you take a plasma membrane like this, okay, so what is happening? It has got the two layers. Now this region, when you see with the help of the electron microscope, is going to be differ from this region, the inner. So when they saw this view, they saw that the extracellular layer is something looking like this, where you can see small dots. Those are nothing but your glycoproteins, right, which are acting as a receptors. Now when you see cytoplasmic layer, that is the inner side. If this is the cell, the inner side of the membrane, you can see like this. So many, more than thousands of proteins are present over there. Okay. So many more proteins are on the cytoplasmic side of the plasma membrane, and this was revealed by using the technique called freeze fracturing plasma membranes. Now, the types of processing that the protein resists differs depending on the target site, so or if it is an integral. So now when you see, this is one example. So we'll talk about freeze fracture technique later. So suppose this is your cell. So what you do, you take the cell, you freeze them. Now, how do you freeze? You don't keep in the fridge. You use liquid nitrogen. Okay. So by next class, you should know what is the temperature of liquid nitrogen. So they freeze a sample with liquid nitrogen. Then they use a diamond cut knife, make a thin sections. And then when you open it, you study under the electron microscope. So from that, you understand, okay, there are certain integral proteins or peripheral proteins which are involved. Now, see, in this case also, if you see these structures, so this figure shows that from the nucleus, the proteins are going to the ER. From ER, it is going to form a transmembrane proteins or glycoproteins or the secretory proteins. So now, depending on the type of the cell, it will have either more of the integral proteins or more of the secretory or the proteins like that. Okay, the peripheral proteins. So depending on the cell type. For example, your pancreatic cells, they are more of secretory proteins because it has to produce a large amount of insulin and then it has to release out so that the glucose absorption can take place. So what are those kinds of cells? They are mainly basically secretory proteins. There are certain cells which are just meant for the interactions. Okay, so they're not going to release anything, but the interaction studies will be there. And for the interaction, you need integral proteins. So the protein profile of the membrane of each cell, it is going to differ. Now, let's see the activity of the protein over here. So you can have that the proteins can be of enzymatic or they allow as a channel or a carrier proteins. These proteins can also act as the enzymes. They're also helping in the signal. So they can bind to the receptor. The ligands can bind to the receptor and then they can pass the signaling. Cell-to-cell recognition, as we discussed just recently. So two membranes having the receptors, the antigen in the form of the carbohydrate will be present. They bind together and they will have its interactions. Then you have got the intracellular joining where two cells attach. Okay. And then attachment to the cytoskeleton and extracellular matrix. This is when the cell is trying to adhere somewhere, any solid surface. So where these proteins are involved. Okay, so these proteins, for example, the bacterial cells have got the fimbriae. So they are also made up of proteins which help them in the attachment or adhering to the surface area. Okay, so there they can actually attach and then they can start reproducing or make a biofilm or whatever the depending on the signal they get. Okay, now this is the one topic which I would like to discuss with you, the story of malaria and glycophorins. So now we know that the answer is glycophorin, by which malarial parasite actually interacts and goes inside the human body. Okay, so it is infecting the RBC. Okay, so now Plasmodium invasion ligands, just 1 second. Okay, so here what I want to discuss is that there are certain receptors which are present on the malarial parasite also. So for example, they are called this is your malarial parasite, and then this is our RBC membrane. Now, if you see what kind of interaction is taking place, it is the EBA 140, 175 and EBL1. Now, they interact with glycophorin C, E, A and B. So, this is what you have to remember. EBL1 with B, 175 with A and EBA 140 with C. Okay. Now, this interaction, when this happens, the person gets malaria. Now, whereas in this case, if suppose you are having a mutation in one of your glycophorin, for example, mutation, it's called the Dantu erythrocyte. Okay, it's one kind of mutation. So if you have a mutation and where instead of having glycophorin A, you have got glycophorin AB, then the interaction will be there, but it won't be complete. Okay, and this will not help the malarial parasite to enter. Getting the point? So if you have got these three interactions of EBA 140, 175 and EBL1 complete with the glycophorins, then the malarial parasite can go inside of the RBC. Now, few people are actually resistant to malaria. Why? Because they have got certain mutations. So that mutation is nothing but you're having different glycophorins. That is A and B together. Okay. And even though there is an interaction happening, still what is happening? It is not able to go inside. Okay. So this is how many people are actually resistant to resistant to malarial parasite. Okay. So that was all about today's class. I hope this is clear, and the meeting time is also getting over. Yes. So any doubts are there, you can ask me right now, and thank you for listening. So any doubts? So that was all about the story of glycophorins and malaria. So now I got in a very interesting video how exactly a mosquito bite actually causes the malaria. So how the Anopheles mosquito, the female mosquito, causes the malaria in humans, and from one human to another human, how it is actually spreading with the help of the Anopheles mosquito. So let's watch out this video. It's very interesting. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to give the credits because it's the unknown source. I just found this video very interesting. I hope you also like watching this. So let's watch out the life cycle of mosquito.
Mosquitoes are usually vegetarian, preferring to drink nectar, fruit juices, and honeydew. Only a pregnant mosquito will bite humans, seeking nutrients from blood to nourish her developing eggs. If she drinks blood from someone infected with malaria, she too becomes infected with the disease. The tiny drop of blood filling the insect's stomach is teeming with malaria parasites. The parasite form that is deadly inside humans cannot survive in the mosquito's stomach and is slowly digested with the rest of her blood meal. However, back in the human host, a few of the parasites turned into a different type of cell, one that is sexual but remains dormant. Malaria sex is triggered when the warm human blood begins to cool inside the insect's stomach. The female form of the parasite matures into an egg. The male form takes a while longer to mature into sperm. This sperm is from an earlier feed. fertilized cell can glide and begins to explore its new environment. It migrates to the outer lining of the mosquito's stomach before transforming into a cyst. Each cyst produces thousands of thin, tiny parasites which seek out and infest the mosquito's salivary glands. The next time this mosquito bites a victim, the malaria parasite will ride in with her saliva and infect another human.
Wow, amazing video, right? To study about the life cycle of mosquito, how exactly they bite and how it is spreading the malaria. So now we know both the genetic, now we know how exactly the malaria causes, what are the proteins involved in the interactions which is helping the plasmodium to get inside our RBC, and the life cycle of mosquito. So now it's very clear to us. So like this, many more topics and many more videos will be updated. So it's a request to all of you, please share and subscribe and press the bell icon so that you also get the latest updates. So thank you for watching, and thanks from the Excelsior Academy also. Keep watching.